Well, hello, I'm Paul. This is Marigold Farms. Welcome to Marigold Farms. I've been blessed with this land which my dad gave to me after years of struggling and prayer. One nice thing about me is I'm disabled, and this farm has come about. I've had to learn how to work with my disability and still produce food. And so I've been blessed to learn how to, grow pole beans and put the vineyard up much higher so that everything is able to work higher. There are heavy days of work where I put it, have to haul the branch mulch, as I call it, or the wood chips in a wheelbarrow. I'll put a back brace on, and I'd say the exercise has been a blessing to me. So I hope that I can address some issues people might have. We're a little bit colder than Paul Goshi. I have to say thanks to Paul. I saw the video in 2012, the year before, on an inspiration. I heard the Asplin trucks, the wood, that do the power lines, that chip the branches in the area, and finally had the courage to go and ask if they needed a drop-off place. Because at that time I'd studied that a good potting soil is about half rotting wood. You'll see some potting soil mixes, you'll see rotten wood, and that's because the wood that's rotten is like a sponge. And the sponge allows the holding of water and for roots to grow. It has air spaces. A good soil is about 50% air. Now think about that. A good soil is about 50% air, allowing free exchange of gases. There's certain gases within the top layers of the soil are exchanged within hours, and deeper down within about a foot within 24 hours. It needs to exchange those gases as the roots are growing. Just like we need to breathe, so does the soil need breathing. And the wood chips certainly allow plenty of air and, like a sponge for gases to exchange, to hold water, to hold air, and so on. So roots don't have to go through hard times. So this, we're in the mountains of northern Idaho. Where my orchard is on a rocky outcropping, and the trees, some of the trees, I remember a tree this big around, a red fir, was over 100 years old because of the slow growth. In that same spot, I dumped manure, made a bed, and grew pole peas within about a space of 3 months. And it was my first really prolific, abundant crop of peas. And it was on, basically subsoil rock. So today maybe you'll be able to see some of the rocky, edges where I can show you how rocky some of the area is. So a theory I have is that as you cover the ground with the mulch, you are trapping more than just the rain coming down. The earth is like an engine that is very hot in the core, and as you go further away from the core, it cools down. Well, the water vapor that goes towards the core comes back up as vapor and is always rising, and the cover traps that vapor. A good example would be you put some food away in the refrigerator and you cover it, and a couple days later, even though it's cool, right, you will see that there is condensation on the lid. And my first experience with putting the branch mulch was right on this driveway. I had some black raspberries over here. You can still see where some of the branch mulch is put, and I put down newspaper, and it was in the middle of summer, no additional rain, and one of the plants had died, and it came back from the roots. In that summer, no additional rain, simply by putting the cover down. So I've learned a lot about the cover. I've been really, really blessed to, with the ideas that Paul shares. It basically saved me to allow greater expansion. My orchard had gone to grass. I had strawberries going to grass, and once you get grass in an orchard, it just doesn't work. You'll see that apple trees and grass do not mix. Really, that's a mistake of many orchards. You'll see that they're struggling, and there gets mosses built on the trunks, on the bark, you'll see that once you plant a tree in using, the system of the branch mulch, it can grow very quickly, and there's very little moss on the bark. It's a healthier tree. So the moss, maybe it's eating sugars or something, I don't know. The branch mulch piles you see here and over there were brought in this winter, and because of my budget, it was a lot of shoveling snow. We had a lot of snow, so I was always shoveling snow to make sure that, and they happened to work in the winter, which is difficult, but it was a lot of shoveling snow to make sure that it came in. They come in the area about every 5 years. The first time this happened was in 2011, 2012, and believe it or not, 5 years later, this was the next big impetus. This rougher grind here, this is tub grindings from a neighbor who put in a lake.
Really?
Right over here. And so the lake is also allowed, probably a lot of a cooling effect in this area, and so that's been really a blessing, a really good neighbor, and it was like a 3-year project putting in his lake.
What do your temperatures get here? High,
we
low?
can get the high in summer to over 100 degrees. That's rare, but it happens. It's maybe 2-3 days, maybe a week. Rarely 2 weeks in a year. I've been here about 15 years as an adult. I also grew up here through my school years. The cold range this winter, we had an unusual cold. In December it was sub-zero Fahrenheit, and normally we go through long periods in the teens and the 20s. 20s is more typical. And then again this year in January we had our sub-zero for a couple more weeks. That usually happens every couple years, every 3-4 years. It's not typical to have a December with no snow to be sub-zero for so long, and then January hit it again hard. And so you'll see that some of the dino kale that I planted this year did not come back to reseed. So you get seed on the second year of kale. So the tub grindings, the first year I got tub grindings, I had 300 yards. That's pretty much all used up. And about 2 years ago, I got another 450 yards. And as you can see, I'm making a big dent into it. So around here, you'll still see remnants of tub grindings. As down there is probably about 12 loads. This year had about 15 loads of wood chips come in. And there have been times that I have bought wood chips simply because when you're planting garlic, you want to keep it clean. You want fresh wood chips on top. It disintegrates pretty quick. One thing that's a little bit different than what most people would expect is I use newspaper here. I first really got into earthworms before, several years before using tub grindings. And I really got into earthworms. And so I've placed these branch mulch wood chips over composting piles that had earthworms, and I think we can find earthworms all the way at the top of the piles coming in from the edge of the piles, even though the center is probably dry and hot. Amazing how much the earthworm does to help disintegrate these piles. And then from some of these piles, I actually use potting soil, sift out the bark and use the earthworm rotten bark and all to make good potting soil. And so it's been a blessing to learn the branch mulch wood chips system, for potting soil. The earthworms help disintegrate everything.
Plus you get the castings, so that's even better.
The cast is part of the potting soil. Very, very rich. So, well, here's where we start. From the orchard, got a lot of rock. I'll go ahead and bust up the rock. Sometimes in the spring is the best time to get it, because after being wet and then frozen, it will bust up easier. Some rocks are much more difficult to work with.
How do you bust it up? Just sledgehammer? Or?
Sledgehammer, put on glasses, use gloves. While I got a minute. Most people wouldn't know. I didn't know for years. Good gloves to have are I think they're vinyl coated. They're breathable in back. But I planted garlic one time, and I used rock basalt, and it was very, very cold, and I started getting cuts and didn't even know I cut myself. So I started looking for gloves. I would say these are about the best, and I go through these, a lot of these. You want breathable in the summer. If it's completely vinyl covered, it can be difficult, but amazing amount of stuff can be done to grab stuff with these good vinyl grip gloves. Over the years, I've learned, different tools you really, really need, and this is a very, very practical one. So if you're doing hours of work, and I usually do about 2-3 hours a day, maybe 4 days a week,
Really?
in the afternoons on the farm.
And how much acreage do you have here?
Total of about 6 acres.
And how much of that do you farm?
I put it all together, it's probably no more than half an acre, but it is expanding. Now I want you to look at the fence. The fence is an 8-foot high enclosure. I would have no orchard. I have about 100 trees. I would have no asparagus and very little food because of the deer pressure and the moose and the elk.
Do you have a lot of them around here?
We have a lot. The last couple of weeks, there's about 4 or 5 that I will see through the fence, just standing at the fence, and probably smelling the good food. And of course, the fence continues up here. And now I'm going to ask you a question. How much acreage do you think this fence is enclosing?
I'd say acre, 1.
An acre and a quarter. Now you probably are very, very close to it because you have acreage.
Yeah, I have about 2.5, so I was kind of doing that, cutting my property
Yep.
into sections like, yeah, it's about that.
Most people who come would say this is 3 or 5 acres.
Well,
It's not till you walk an acre. An acre is about 212 feet on
Yeah.
a side square. Until you walk an acre do you really appreciate the size of it.
how much there is, yeah.
My first surprise was when I walked a 12.5 acre parcel that was partially treed, and I was surprised how long it took to just go down even one length of it. It helps you understand. Before I knew the different systems of growing food, I thought you needed a lot of land to grow food. Now it's just like you really have to be very careful to take good care of what you have, or you can grow far more food than you can handle. Right here are the rocks I bust up, and then I do put them back as I'm covering. I wanted to mention what I do differently. Is Paul has an established garden, right?
Mhm.
Those people who are trying to start a garden, it's more difficult because you're dealing with grass. How do you deal with grass? So, much of what is said is put down. Newspapers, 5 layers thick, wet it down. I've had a problem with that because I already have earthworms here in a lot of places. And the earthworms come right through and eat it up very quickly and allow the grass to come right back through. And so now you have a deeper problem. So what I've had to do is use cardboard. And so I just recently had to start getting more cardboard as you'll hopefully today see new areas that I'm laying it down, and you'll see some of what I'm doing in progress. But I put cardboard down in that whole area like Thursday and Friday, and a single Saturday, all that cardboard blew in the wind, and then I had to come back and get about 50 buckets of rock all day Saturday to put it down because I hadn't been able to put manures and things on it. Now at the time I used a system where I put manure in the beds and then I just put the tub grindings on the path. And basically the manure has earthworms and earthworm casting. And then I got into rock basalt. We are on granitic, decomposing granite kind of subsoil, subrock. Rock basalt, and the darker the better, has about 70, maybe up to 90 minerals. I learned about it on YouTube, from a couple in Scotland who, for about 15 years, are doing it. They went out to an area that does not have trees, it's rolling hills, it's called the Heath, I believe. And they were told you'll never grow potatoes there. Well, with compost and rock basalt, the compost helps break down the rock basalt, they were growing massive potatoes that a year later were hardly wrinkled, just on the shelf at room temperature in the house. You'll notice that by having a fully mineralized soil, and Paul talks a lot about this, that the food is wholesome, it also keeps for a very long time. And that's a blessing, to have food that really stores well. A lot of the food that I grow here, like the carrots, I can't eat them with sugar issues right now because they're so sweet. But I'll grow things that are chunky. If you want to put it in storage, you don't want it thin because it will dry out faster. So literally my carrots will look like chunks. And if we have time today, I'll actually pull you some carrots and you'll see. I grow a variety, I think it's called Chantenay, Corliss or something like that, where it's very, very hunky. And it literally stores like potatoes. Part of the planning of trees is researching varieties and researching what you're wanting to do. Most people will plant too close. My first trees you'll see later, hopefully. We're planted too close. These are now 25 feet apart. We had logged this completely. Brush come up, trees have already come up. And I came in with a backhoe. A guy on a backhoe came and pulled out the major woody brush. And so there's still some holes. We're going to have to watch where we step today, but as you can see, it's come back, but at least it's controllable. And now I'll show you what's involved. You want to make sure you're going to kill the grass. I am really blessed to get burlap bags. So first of all, you go in and you tear in with like a potato fork. Very handy tool. You tear out all the brush and all the roots as best you can. Then what you're going to do is, and you can see some earthworms there already at work. I put hay down, okay, and the reason for the hay is when it gets wet, it helps kill grass. And it also, you know, smothers grass trying to come through. The woody stuff eventually I'm going to have to keep at because it'll start sending its roots here. But just to get it established, this is getting it going. And then this is coffee chaff. I've also gotten coffee grounds, but recently I've been getting a lot of coffee chaff from this company that I've known that has the burlap bags with coffee bags. And then the reason I've just recently this year started doing this is you can pour in water very quickly and it breaks it up. But it's still going to hit the burlap, right? And you want to make sure it's a weave of burlap allows the water through. The planting of trees, I've lost so many trees by planting trees wrong. Walnut trees have like a tuber with little hair roots when you first get them, and then from the tuber it angles up like this and then goes to the whip. And that angle up needs to be above the ground. Most trees you get from the nursery, they say you can plant a couple inch or two below where it was planted, not nut trees. You'll see in the forest their roots will actually be above ground exposed as dirt may erode away. And so I had been planting these for years wrong and been wondering why, you know, it took a year or two. Sometimes they disappear and then they come back. Nut trees are very hard to get established, and they will do that. I've had one tree completely disappear for a year and then came back the next year from the roots, sending a shoot. And then with the nut trees, you'll see that I have cages around them pretty much because of, you know, rodents or rabbits or whatever trying to get to them and damaging them. I've also found something very interesting. A single spider can hold a tree hostage and kill it. And the reason is a spider will go up, and when you first plant a tree, it will start sucking the juice out of the leaves and dry it out.
Really?
And those first leaves can't get started. And without getting a start on the leaves, to get the energy from the sun, the plant gets exhausted and dies. I've lost even fruit trees that were 4 or 5 foot whips when I bought them, just by a spider. So if you notice in the branches, you notice a cobweb, start looking for the spider and kill it. Now there probably is a remedy like putting garlic spray or water on to stop it, but I've noticed that. It's amazing, one little thing left bad. I've also seen we have a bad cutworm problem. Where you have grass, you'll probably have cutworms. As you get into more the tub grindings, the branch mulch, the wood chips, you usually don't have that as big a problem. I almost lost a plum tree because I kept coming out and I'd find, and this is also on my grapevines, I kept finding new growth being cut in half. And cutworms will climb and cut the new growth, even on trees and on vineyards. And I've researched it, and there are cutworms that will damage vineyards this way. And if you can at least get it beyond the stage where the cutworm at that stage in the early spring won't keep killing it, I finally had to take, when I realized I thought it was birds coming in, I couldn't fit, I finally took a cage and wrapped gauze completely around it and tied it here so the cutworm couldn't come up, and that saved a plum tree. Every year I try to do a new thing, and this year I'm getting into dry beans. Beans are a wonderful protein. They have some beans growing that they've developed varieties. I think a lot of people in Oregon. There's quite a few different websites that carry, and I ordered a lot out of Oregon. They actually have a bean that tastes like beef.
Really?
They have several varieties, very phenomenal. Beans, something interesting about beans, most people would think of dry beans or green beans, but what a lot of people are not familiar with are shelly beans. And here's my explanation. One of the peas I grow, one of the best, is sugar snaps. It's edible, right? So at the early stage, it's edible as a green snap pea, even if there's no seed inside. The best is when you let it grow and it gets real sugary with the inside is now also edible. You can then let it dry and you now have a dry pea. Well, beans are in the same cycle. Some beans are just good for green beans, and they're not very tasty as a seed. Some have dual purpose. They're tasty as a green bean, and if they dry, they're also good as a dry bean. They have taste. I mean, you can still eat dry beans if you had to. And some also are very good as a shelly bean, meaning at the stage where they're fully grown inside, but they're still soft. You can then freeze them, you can eat them, some you can eat fresh, and that's a lot of food. Further, if we were starving, if we had to survive, well, I know you're a prepper, the amount of food that is edible, I didn't realize that is edible. That if you had to, you can eat the carrot tops. You can eat the twigs of peas, the young shoots of peas. It's actually a delicacy. There's a whole market for it. Most of this you can research on YouTube. I do a lot of research. I've been blessed with your trip. Is it to Matthew?
Matthew down in Oregon, yeah.
Matthew, since my heart condition, I was buying hawthorn for my heart, and now I grow hawthorn. And I would say that the shoots of hawthorn are more tasty to me than asparagus in the spring.
Really?
It is that delicious. He's right on. And also I'm trying to get mulberry trees to grow because I've tasted mulberry leaves. They're also very good. And I literally dry the leaf and actually took every leaf off the hawthorn tree when it was at the stage of ready to drop its leaves. And I still have some that I chew, throw with some nuts and just chew. It's a huge blessing to realize the abundance of food that can grow on trees. More and more I'm getting into permaculture, because if you think about it, if every year you have to put in a crop and it's growing like this, why not grow walls of food, which is your tree? And you go to Paul's place and the trees are super loaded. It's hard to have all that super load on the ground and a place to walk. So trees are a huge blessing. One of the reasons trees help mineralize the soil is they are deep miners. they're going down deep and they're digging all that rock and subsoil. We pulled a tree out of here that was literally, the roots were jacked into the rock. And it was, I think the gentleman pulling it out with his backhoe said it was the most difficult stump for him to remove. It was over 2 hours.
Wow.
And a lot of the rock we then busted up went back out. You know, I piled it up and then I had him bring in whole slabs, and then they were easy to bust up later and put out, as you'll see today. Put on that. Let's show you how much of this branch mulch I used. Now, I didn't inoculate this with earthworms, and I kind of feel sad that I didn't, but I do see the castings into the little black spots, and some of it is still dry from when it was dumped about 2 years ago, right? So it still has not gotten wet. One of the things I try to do is always knock down your pile flat. If you want it to, you know, not to have too many dry spots, get this flat. If you just let them dump it and put it like this, you know, that's how they keep hay dry, is the water sheds that way. When you can start flattening more of the area, like if I could even flatten it to about here and even flatter, you will end up catching more of the rainwater. And of course, when it's flat on the ground, it's catching all of it. Pruning, I used to be against pruning. Pruning is the taking of 80 to 90% of the tree or the vine every year for maximum production. It needs to be done. I even in my vineyard do summer pruning. It's necessary. A leaf that is behind the leaf in the vineyard is 1/20th productive of the leaf in the sun. So if it takes, let's say, 15 leaves to grow a bunch of grapes, it's going to take 300 leaves in the shade to grow that same bunch of grapes. It's that potent. And they have a science down to what? It's about 12, 15 leaves per apple to grow an apple.
Yeah.
The leaves in the shade of the other leaf all the time. Now, just being in loose shade does get light, but being really in the shade is not productive. And so always you're pruning to get to maximum air and light for the plant. And the more air also, because of our damp springs and damp falls, the less fungal and rots you'll have, which can be damaging to grapes.
I remember when Paul pruned his grape when I was out there, and I was just amazed on how much he took off. I was like, that seems like a lot. And he's like, yeah, come back later. And I was like, of course. I went back, and sure enough.
Yeah, you'll see just little sticks for the vineyard. You'll see more T-posts than rebar. This is a new area I'm developing. These are Walker onions. Walker onions are fantastic to have, but I had so many. I had them around the trees, and I noticed the cherry trees were not growing with 2 rows by each tree, and it was stunning their growth or whatever, so I took out a lot of onions. But I finally decided to just bury them all here in massive amounts, and it's a barrier between the forest and this new grow area. These new trees here staked out are hawthorn. While I'm here, this is the remnants of rock basalt. Oh, we got a snake there today. I used to think snakes were terrible.
No.
And snakes have a purpose, help get gophers. And anyway, I was very blessed in Spokane. The area is basically rock basalt. And I'll show you. This is 1/4 inch minus. Now, a lot of rock basalt is sold as like 300 mesh fine or 150 mesh fine. That's really not necessary as you study rock basalt. And of course it's good and black. It looks gray when it's dry. Here's an example of a little bit of gray.
Right.
Right? But it is black when it's wet. And this, I put in a 30-year application. I don't want to be 80, 90 years old still trying to do it. A 1-year application is 1 pound per 10 square feet. Now, of course, you need to use compost or earthworms or something to help break it down. But just put that in water and see how black the water gets and floats. You'll see stuff in the water. So there really is always breaking down. A 10-year application is 1 pound per square foot. I was putting 2 and 3 pounds per square foot. It would take about 3 truckloads at 15 tons a truck or 12 yards a truck to do 1 acre. Very, very valuable. Now, one of the minuses in doing that big an application is I noticed for a couple years, unless you have it breaking down very quickly, that carrots growing in this will tend to have in their skin this, and it can be sharp, right?
Oh.
And so I had some greedy carrots for a while. So that's a mistake. You want to be careful on that. But in general, there's our friendly snake.
Yeah.
And I have it covered because I was actually taking this rotting tub grindings and spreading it over it. And I don't see earthworms in, but at different stages you'll see earthworms in this. We still do have cold nights sometimes at this stage of year. Now this is a mock orange or syringa plant that I finally got a handle on and pruned down. Very smells like orange blossoms, and I believe it's the state flower of Idaho. And again, pruning, this was just massive, and this had a lot of weeds as well. Years ago I had 4 tons of rotten hay here, and so now I finally was able to utilize this area and kind of reclaim it. This is the new tub grindings. You already can see some new fungus on there.
Yeah.
And this was just brought in a couple months ago. And again, you see how I flattened it? We could actually go in here and see how wet it is already. And, you know, well on its way to disintegrating. These are hawthorn trees I planted. This is the one the Lord planted. I had been looking on my property for hawthorn leaves. I know some of the roads around here had them, but I noticed on my property I didn't have one. And so the Lord planted this, right? You just have this kind of, you have in your heart, you hope, you pray, and the Lord provided this. And this is, to me, I also think of the passion of our Lord because of the thorns, right? But that from such a thorny plant comes blessings. This is in the apple family. It's also called May apple in England. The shoots of the hawthorn, when they're about 4, 5, 6, 8 inches long, are really delicious. I consider them more delicious than asparagus, thanks to Matthew's video with you. I really, really appreciate that. This looks like it's going to have a lot of blossoms this year. I have pruned it so it doesn't get high. And notice I won't take out what normally I would take out all the upgrowth. I'll let it turn to twigs. And this is like a lettuce tree to me. And then in the fall, just before the leaves fell, I actually went back and took all the leaves off and dried them, and I'm still eating them. I'll take a handful of dried, not even crushed. You can crush them like Matthew does, and put them with some nuts and eat them, and it's good for your heart. This is like a rocky ledge, and this orchard is actually growing on a rock ledge. There is some dirt, but now you can see some of the work involved. suppressing the grass with burlap bags, and I've been blessed with probably several thousand burlap bags over the period of about 15 years collecting them. Have some real good friends at a coffee roasting company. And you know, some of the contacts you make, you never know it's going to be such a blessing long haul. You can see I also take logs. Sometimes I split them, you know, the trees I'm taking down. I give a lot of wood away, but also using it. Rocks, it's pretty heavy on rock. There's basalt. But this will disintegrate with compost and the earthworms and all, and the earthworms love that. You'll see them make all their paths in the mineral of the rock. And then the garbage, any prunings or whatever from your area go into the next grow area. Compost also. And while I'm thinking of it, I have an inspiration and I've used it for years. People, you know, one of the things you want to do, people say, what do you do to start a garden? Well, pray and all. Two practical things. Think about a fence and think about saving compost. Right? Start saving up compost. Get a compost pile. Start recycling what you have. One of the difficulties is you go online and there's these people, you know, everybody has different things to keep the smell of compost in your kitchen down. Very simple thing I do is I have a bucket. I use biodegradable soap. I take my dishwasher into the bucket and all the compost goes into that bucket. It's almost always underwater. You don't get gnats and flies, and it's just like toilet water. There's no smell if it's underwater, right? And then it's easy to keep the bucket clean. You don't have a problem because you simply throw it out with the water to the next grow area or your compost pile, whatever. If I hadn't put up the fence, I would not have had this plant. It's now in bloom, believe it or not. It's called false box. It's used as an ornamental planting around churches. There are different varieties, but if you look very carefully, there's a very tiny flower in the shape of a cross. Very pinkish little flower, and there's just lots and lots of them. Do you see that? All that pink?
Yep.
And there also is the danger of people harvest them because they're used in bouquets a lot. This is probably a 10-year-old plant now, and it loves to grow, so I have to keep it in check. But literally, this is mowed down by the deer, and you'll find just a few twigs underneath some heavy growth in areas. And so that's one of the blessings of the fence. It allowed this to grow, and it's very beautiful, I think. It's almost evergreen. So we're now in the orchard area. You can see the garlic growing. I used to do 800, 1200 varieties. I got into garlic about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. And we do have some gopher problems with the garlic. I don't do hardnecks as much. Hardnecks don't keep as well, although they're bigger bulbs. They only will last till about Christmas. And they're also harder to multiply. If a hardneck has 4 bulbs, right, it takes one bulb to make 4 bulbs. Whereas with softnecks, if you can put in 1 clove and get 12 or 20, you can get more. One of my best is the artichoke variety of softneck. Gets massive size. I'm putting in more and more of that. It's a keeper about 6 to 8 months. But very, very nice to see the multiplication of it. A hardneck is 1 row of garlic around a center stem that is stiff or hard. A softneck usually has 2 or 3 rows, and its top is soft. It's not hard. The hardnecks will end up with the scape that you can take off, and it's edible. It's given to, you know, people that appreciate it know what it is. It's given, you know, people can sell it to restaurants, whatever. Oriental restaurants, they know what that scape that turns, and different hardnecks have different varieties. Garlic is one of about 8 or 10 foods that you, if you get into, you really need to have books and do your research well, especially if you're going to make an income from it. You need to start small and grow with it. Some foods I would consider having a lot of books, a lot of varieties of garlic. There's hundreds of varieties. There's, you know, different subcategories and categories. would be garlic, would be grapes, would be milk, cheese, would be coffee, chicken, eggs, lots of varieties of chickens for different reasons, for meat, for eggs, for dual purpose. I did have chickens. I was blessed with them. I learned a lot. Used the manure, that sort of thing to get going. One of the things is a good farmer is always thinking about his workers. I do have animals on the farm, even though I don't. And they are earthworms. And if you're finished doing a crop, but you let the soil dry out, you could be killing earthworms. The red wiggler is great because it will leave capsules in stress. If it's too hot, like it's going to dry out and not be able to survive, it will then leave its capsules and eggs in capsules for the next time it is. If it's too cold, the same thing. The wood chips, the branch mulch, allow them to survive mostly during the summer and the winter. So why have to start the whole cycle over? It takes 90 days before they actually get into reproduction, right, from that growth. Why? And then it, just keep continuing from there. So that's part of what the wood chips do, is it allows that, cycle to keep multiplying.
Now, what do we have growing here under the trees?
This is comfrey. I really, really, really researched comfrey. Because if you just get the comfrey that spreads by seeds, you can end up with a problem. There's some that spread by roots and end up, like peppermint or whatever, can take over like a weed. This is, if I'm not mistaken, it's Bocking 14 or Bocking 4. It's the one that a gentleman, I can't remember what state, North Carolina maybe, sells, and ended up in August that year, very late to start it, right? But I started it in pots. I bought 25 and he put in extra, threw in 10 extra, whatever, so I had like 35. And it was a good investment. This is probably too close to the tree. I've learned that it's a mistake to be this close. I took out, here's where I had 5 almond trees that grew very, very fast like weeds. It's my first trees that were reliable, but I had to take out. And right there you see 3 other new almond trees this year that I planted. Right. Those are, I think they're all-in-ones. And right here you can see where I cut the almond tree out.
Oh yeah.
And these are probably too close. Then I started to put, I think I got some right here. No, that's not it. It's a weed. Here's one.
Right.
So I started putting in between, but now I have plenty of it.
Now what's this right here that's growing?
That's a, I think it's called Fall Solomon Seal, and I'll need to pull it out. This is the Multiplier Onion, and right now I've had, sometimes I've been able to harvest some before spring, so like a week before spring.
Really?
This is edible. It's like a green onion. It comes up every year perennially. And then the tops, right, will have little onion sets. I have found that you can take those onion sets and also freeze them and put them in your stir fries and all. A very, very valuable addition because they come in so early, whereas other people today would be, just planting their seeds if they remember to plant them before May, because you can plant onions as soon as the ground is worked. But this is such a blessing, you can take a bunch, I can harvest that would last 3-4 weeks for me. But if I remember, I'll send you home with some.
Sure.
This is a walnut tree, a very, very small one.
Yeah, it is.
But amazing how you just keep working with it. This is to keep the rabbits out. Right here is the tree. and from the same nursery, but look, if you order earlier, you usually get a better pick. And this year they didn't have the smaller, you know, however, what was it, a foot high for $2.50 now. This year it was a foot to a foot and a half for $5. I think it was a better value. Have some trees in bloom. These are apricots. I had 4 of my 12 apricots produced last year. Some of them, one of the apricots, the Rabata back there, produced massively big, almost peach-sized apricots. Yellow-orange on one side and red on the other. Very, very beautiful. I did net them, but I don't think I'd have to net them. I was afraid the birds might come and get them, but they didn't. These are apple trees. And again, I was hoping to get them go high so you can grow food under and then come back down. But I've learned since you cut the ends that actually makes it rigid. And you can see where I've taken out, you know, branches here just this year. So it looks like some of the branches I take off look like the horns of a deer or elk.
Oh, yeah.
What do you call it, a rack?
Yep.
So I say, here's these racks. Well, basically, doesn't it look neat? You're left with racks of food later.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, you're developing your garden to be your grocery store for fresh food.
Yeah.
It's such a blessing. I had raspberries in here, but it definitely was too much work. See right here, some of the raspberries are still trying to come back. This year I hope to grow pole beans and regular beans here to reclaim this. You might see all these weeds. I'm not too worried because I'm planning on taking this branch mulch and throwing on top. Some of this I'll be digging out, or maybe keep, you know, 1 or 2 varieties.
Right.
This was a very early variety that does very well, so I might keep a couple plants. You see, it just, from where I planted it up here, actually back here I think, it is now all the way down to there.
And over there.
And way, way over here. So
Yep.
branch mulch is great, but it also, all those roots can really go fast. My first use of this, these are 52-foot beds, was a pumpkin patch and watermelon. And the best watermelon I found to grow here is the Blacktail Mountain watermelon. It was developed by a gentleman in North Idaho who now is at the Sand Preservation Crane Hill or something in Iowa.
Sandhill
Sand Hill,
Preservation Society.
something like that.
That's one of the places Paul gets his seeds and stuff at.
Yeah, they have seeds too. So, but I had a single soaker hose down the middle at the time, and right over through here, I pulled out about a ton of rock. Had to bust it up when I was putting this in. They're deep beds, and this is yet it's a rock outcropping. My purpose is that the beds are 3 feet. No, I'm sorry, 3.5 feet. And the path is 3 feet. And the reason for that is I've always learned that when you're kneeling, for a taller person like me, you're always needing room. I had originally beds with about 1.5 feet wide or even 2 feet was not enough. I had beds that were 2x6s in my original kitchen garden over there. And what happens now is this system allows intensive amount of food. So you can put, if you had to, put a soaker hose system going down and back, and you can plant a row of carrots on each side of the soaker hose. You get 4 rows of carrots. You can get 4 or 3 rows of beans. You can do 3 rows of garlic. Garlic doesn't need a soaker hose, but now I don't even hardly use the soaker hose as you build up the soil. What happens is, as the beans grow, let's say you have beans, you end up about a foot of path. It fills in, and it's just as full as a garden, but it's all growing from 3.5-foot bed and a 3-foot path. Now everybody's different. I'm that size. It so happens that 3.5 feet plus 3 feet equals about 2 meters. So you can also use the metric. I wanted to design the system so that the same ideas could be used worldwide for those who use the metric system. That in the same 2 meters, for every 2 meters, you would have a path and a bed. 4 feet just seemed too long for even me to reach into the middle to weed and do all that bending. So I was trying, I've tried to maximize it, but it's amazing how much, if you use that much path, how much food production is taken away in the perimeters. You're not left with much, but what is left is intense, and then it can grow into the light. And that's what a tree, I mean, you look at the footprint of a tree, but it can take its roots below, right, and above. It's a wonderful design from the Lord. This is my first orchard, and I grew it rather close, and it had grass. And I found out in my studies that grass and apple trees for sure do not join. They're constantly fighting against each other. Many orchards are in grass, and the apple trees just don't do well. So I had a real problem. Even had to put wood down, and really this is deeply built up to. And now it's starting to come. And these trees still are not that productive because of, having started out through trial and error. I kind of had wanted to do what they do in your area where they grow apple trees, or they used to.
On a fence line?
On a fence line. And so that's why they're planted close. But I wouldn't plant them that close, I don't think, again.
No.
This is one of my most productive pear trees. The first year, one of the branches just twisted down and started to produce. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get anything this year. A fly came in to all the buds and ate the buds. And I tried to net it, and it was windy, so if it allows the tree to grow in a good year, maybe take a sabbatical, I'm not too worried about that.
Right.
But last year, about 2 or 3 branches produced food, and they were loaded, and they get very, very, very large. So you wouldn't think a small tree like this could produce so much, but it can. This started to produce last year. This may be, you can see the rabbit damage. This may die.
Oh, wow.
I do see it trying to bloom or to bud. But a tree will exhaust itself even if it has no nutrition there, right? Not able to get it. So we'll see if this can survive. But it could also be the rootstock, because this had died and came back. It could be the rootstock, which may not be reliable anyway. My goal in pruning is a little bit more than Paul's, is because I'm also wanting to keep these pathways open. And so you'll see that my goal in pruning is to go this way.
Right.
And if it does go, that it would be higher. If it's going to be a permanent branch, it would be well higher than your head. So that this really does look sparse, but you can see this is a nectarine. You can see the amount of food that will be just racked here, and next to it, each set of buds, are the leaves that are going to help produce the food. And each of these leaves will then become branches. Now nectarines and peaches, especially peaches, I don't have much success with because of peach leaf curl. The peach leaf curl is I think it's a fungus or virus. I think it's a virus that is vectored with bugs that bring it, right? That carry it on their feet. That the leaf gets all curly and changes color, and eventually you get too much of that and the tree will die. It may produce food that year, but it will eventually die. It dies, the leaf curl dies at about 80 degrees, and the reason is it won't die is it'll go for months as we keep damp, cool weather in the spring. Almonds are slightly affected by it, not that bad, at least the varieties I had. Nectarines less, but the most was the peaches. I lost peach trees on it.
Wow.
There is a way to fix it, and it has to do with, I use C90 salt. Usually does very well, but the amount of time involved, it's just not worth it for fruit that I can't even eat. It's lovely to give away, right?
Right.
So I've had another peach nectarine tree dies down there. These are 2 nectarine trees right here. If they die, I'm not going to probably replant them.
Right.
You know, you eventually give up at some point, but it's nice. They're beautiful blossoms. Down here we have potato onions. Potato onions are planted like garlic in the fall, and from each, it's almost like a shallot, but the old timers would oftentimes have 50 pounds of this, and that was all the dry onions they needed, you know, the bulb onions, the cooking onions. What happens is this grows up, you know, like the big spikes of an onion, and between 4 and 12 or more bulbs will actually start to grow later, and they'll almost pop above the ground, and you'll see that they'll actually push a hole here through the branch mulch. It's kind of neat to see how it happens. And it's called a potato onion because it multiplies like the eye of a potato. One potato gives more potatoes, right? And that it actually multiplies, and sometimes you can get them pretty massive. This is one of the more original onions, and there are people who have tried to develop the seeds from them and get back to the original onions rather than the commercial onions. There's a whole story to it, but it's a pretty amazing amount of food for not having to worry too much about it. Garlic is simply putting in the fall at the right time where it has enough time to grow below without being too early to start growing above and get frosted above. A very simple way I do garlic is I'll dig the trench 5 to 6 inches deep, put in the clove, and every year I'm giving it more space. You can do it intensive, but with more space things just happen better and they get bigger. And then with fresh wood chips on top the trench. You do not fill back the trench, you put fresh ones on. I have found that is the easiest way to at the same time put new covering at the same time you're planting. And then it leaves it clean for everything is much cleaner. It's not, you don't have a lot of dirt on your stem that's coming up. What your stem in your garlic is really called the leaves or something. I don't know the whole science, but it's quite a science. But it's an amazing thing not to have to water garlic. I've seen garlic pull through just like really cold weather, and you think it couldn't take it. At 5, 6 inches below this, maybe even 4 inches, it's back. And it's nice to have something to harvest in June and July before your big harvest time. You do need to stagger everything so you're not harvesting everything at once. And that is nice that garlic comes in. I believe it's the hardnecks come in first, generally, and several varieties come in sooner. There's a way to tell when the top leaves are turning yellow. Every leaf is attached to a wrapper on the bottom.
Really?
If you look at garlic at some of the leaf junctures, it looks like a computer board. It is an amazing thing to see. It looks like a computer chipboard. And when the top leaf bottom wrappers are dying, the top ones are turning yellow. About the stage it's a third or half, you want to start lifting your garlic. You don't want to let garlic go over 90 degrees. Over 20 minutes in the sunlight will cook them.
Really?
You do not dry garlic, you cure it. It needs to be studied well to do it. I've had, some cloves you buy in the store and you wonder why they yellow or they turn rotten. It's probably got cooked in the drying process rather than cured. In the barn, I open up the vents, and then you'll see in the barns curtains and burlap hanging to keep the garlic from being exposed to any sunlight. After 90 degrees, you do it in the morning. You're constantly covering with burlap in your wheelbarrow. It really needs to be done well. Garlic is the most used herb in the world and the most used medicine in the world. And while I'm at it, onions is the most used vegetable in the world, while I think in America it's the tomato. And bananas is the most used fruit in America, and I think in the world it's the mango. So sometimes we need to get a world perspective of things. Onions and garlic are very, very handy to go by. It's rich in vitamin C, medicine, blood thinner for garlic. There's a lot. There's a lot of blessing to have it. Onions I transplant. I used to have 2 rows next to each tree, and you can see how I've patched that up at most of the trees. And now I have them here. I have had an experience of kicking my chin on this and really gouging myself on stakes. So as these stakes die, and if the Lord wants me to have more tours, these are row ends, right? And they're also quick to come from the kitchen and grab.
Yeah.
I put in lilacs for beauty, and also think the scent has something. Every plant has its purpose. This lovely scent can also do something. Maybe it can attract the bees, even though they don't want to be on here. They can then be attracted to the flowers. We also get bumblebees here. And it's good to know the cycle of the bumblebee. So here you can see what looks like a few sticks ready to burst into bloom.
And what is this again?
This is a plum tree, and I don't remember the variety. I have quite a few varieties of plums.
And these are all plum on this side over here?
These may be 2.5 rows. These are cherries here.
Oh, really?
And the cherries have not done well, and that was because I had onions with them. This is the only reason I can think of. When I pulled up these Walker onions, I was amazed how far out the roots are spread. Long, long, long roots in every direction. So, and again, this is one of the first years I've been able to stop the growth this way, because you have to have some growth for a tree, to really start working on the growth this way.
Now these cherries, how old are they?
Okay, that last cherry planted last year, and the rest probably the year before.
So these are going to get huge too, and wide.
I don't plan them to get huge.
Really?
You keep cutting them, keep pruning them. I don't want them high. They can get very long.
Right.
And this can even go off the row, right? But I pretty much want to keep it
You're just going to
small.
keep topping them every year?
It doesn't become a real problem, except that these branches will tend to grow.
Right.
But then you get stakes off them. There's a balance too. Some of these twigs, like Paul would normally take stuff going down,
Right.
but this year I wanted to get the plums off of them. And then the next year you just take it out. And there are an example of a tree where normally, remember, Paul teaches you don't want stuff coming to the center. In this case, this is like 2 separate trees. This is actually in the light, and I've seen where they actually develop trees to cross.
And he doesn't like that too, because he does the whole, he does the right and left side too, and you're cutting that off to make your path.
Right.
So in that case, it would probably be okay to come more into the middle, because you're not blocking the sun from anything over here on the right or the left.
So, but plenty, I think you still can get that football through the Japanese talk about, and I mean, you get a sense of, and you learn, like sometimes I'll have a backup twig, like this might be the one I really want
Right.
next year. So you'll see I'll sometimes leave a backup twig underneath. I don't know if I gave an example, but you know, sometimes you just want to experiment. Giant phlox, they grow sometimes, some good years they'll get this high and then they're just like phlox. You know, all that beautiful bloom on top. This is a black raspberry, a commercial variety. I pulled out a native variety here that grew very well. This is a little microclimate here. Up here can get hot, you know, the bedrock's underneath and it's quite exposed until these trees are in full bloom and everything's going. But what happens here, I saw stuff grow that normally wouldn't grow here. This was originally black raspberries when I was really into black raspberries before learning the branch mulch system. And I would plant in holes, and I had a black raspberry that was completely root bound when we pulled out and started to redo this.
Really?
All it was solid root, like solid wood, all in one hole. It couldn't get out of the hole. It was such hard dirt and rock. And there are ways to break that bond up. Some people will pour down 1 or 2 hydrogen peroxide bottles. It breaks that cement. If you shovel a hole, you also need to break it out. But you know, the roots need something to get through. Those holes get plugged up, and hydrogen peroxide can undo it. A lot of your compost and all can do it. My mistake was I would put compost down the hole. And when Paul teaches how to plant a tree, you plant it in its soil and you say, tough luck, buddy.
This is your home.
This is your home. We'll feed you from above, right? And then it has like a natural tea coming down. My mistake, I put too much when you're planting a tree, the tree's first vitality is its own. It's got to, you know, use its own carbohydrate and whatever's in the roots, in the stem. And so, big mistake. I learned a lot. But this had all been black raspberries, but these black raspberries here did well. And the only reason I can think of is that the cool from the forest would move in, right? The shade. And this is something about the branch mulch. On a hot day, do you like the shade better or out in the hot sun?
Oh, the shade. I do.
It is hard to believe. We're not down there thinking about it. But this is shading the root. And when you take this off, the dirt gets hot, and the root is hot, and the tree is hot, and the tree is stressed. But now, think about this. If it's a hot day, could you take the sun if you could put your feet in cold water?
Yeah.
Go wading or, you know.
Yep.
Okay, that cools you off. You pour water on your wrists or take a drink of cold water. You don't need water everywhere. Your system takes that cool. If the roots on a hot day are the cool, beautiful, 54 degree, 52 degree temperature, the earth at that level it always is, the tree can survive, right? It's staying cool, it's getting hydrated. That's something we forget about, is that this is shading the root and the surroundings of the root and keeping the roots cool, and the tree can take the stress better. This was Dinosaur Kale, and because of the frost and the rabbits, it didn't survive. I was hoping to get seed from it this year,
Right.
because kale is a biennial, and I didn't. This maybe, no, I think that's a weed, but I'm going to leave it still because I'm not quite sure if that's it, but it doesn't look like it. One nice thing is you'll notice this is where they backed into, dumped branch mulch with heavy trucks. But the nice thing is you're not too worried. I mean, you see the trees growing in the very tracks. That is probably a maple tree. That is a pine tree. If you ever short on trees, your branch mulch will oftentimes produce. Now my last spot to dump compost was there, so sometimes if it looks clean I still do it. And it's been kind of slippery going down the slope. Some mornings it's frozen.
Slippery slope.
And wood chips are not, when they're frozen, can be very slick. So
Yeah.
I will have to sometimes go like this all the way down. And then this is my next grow area. And it's relatively clean, maybe a rinse, and it's done.
Yeah.
And I don't even have to put a lid. In fact, you don't want to put a lid on because of the condensation, especially in the summer. And there's no smell. And if there's a smell, let's say it was something fishy, it's just like if you had a fish wrapper in your garbage, you take it out pretty quick, right?
Right.
So same thing. This is part of an old worm bed, right? Compost, just keep putting on llama manure. We have a couple that has llamas about 5 miles from here. I borrowed my dad's truck. And there may be earthworms in here right now. But this is all earthworm castings for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably up in the new mulch.
Oh, yeah.
Let's take a look. You can see this is rotting. There we go. There they are.
Yeah.
There's a nice big fat one. And so the sense of what happened here is I had to shovel the snow for them to back up, and then actually came over the snow when we dumped it. And then this settled, so that's why we have that. And you can see how it's still dry under there.
Oh, yeah.
But some of the earthworms are up here because of coming in from the sides. I don't know if we can see some right now, but you can see how soggy that is already.
Yep.
In just a couple months. We've been blessed with lots of rain. And you can see, look at that.
Yeah, that's just pure.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And then we can see where we're doing a grow area. You can see grass already being suppressed by the cardboard.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather get this down and started, and then sometimes I'm not able to get to it for a year or two. And then I'll just keep throwing cardboard where needed. But we're starting to kill that grass. We're holding it down with rock. The rock is disintegrating. There's coffee grounds now I throw. This becomes my next compost pile in the process of becoming a grow area. And I already threw in, okay, this is lupin, right? Beautiful flower. It's also a nitrogen fixer. This is basically pine needles that are decomposing. Have some earthworms in it. And we're sitting right next to the vineyard. I put the vineyard in 2013. The prior years I had this for squash. This started out as 4 truckloads of rotten logs. This is actually a drop off, right? And then, so this is a hill, but I made a terrace. And it took a while to build it up, mostly by hand. I had soaker hose in here, now I don't even do that. And then I do remember when these are 10-foot T-posts, and when I put in one of these T-posts, I pounded myself in the head. I missed the post, right? I hit it sideways and went boing. Yeah. The lesson that if you're doing it, I was on a 2-step ladder. The lesson is, and I got on the ground immediately because I didn't want to faint or something. But the lesson is, I should have had a hard hat on.
Yeah. And
I do have a hard hat for when I log. So, but 2 of these are new this year. I put in 3 Marquette. Marquette comes in very early. It's a wine grape. This is Leon Malo, 5 Leon Malo here, a wine grape. And then the last row up there are seedless table grapes. 2 are Canadas, 2 are Reliance, I think it is, and 1 seedless Concord. And if you ever go to market, most people do not like seeded grapes. Put in seedless.
Yeah.
This brings in a discussion of, I've had people say, well, do you think seedless is part of God's plan? Well, it's a sport. it's a natural sport, so I think it is. What about a hybrid? I believe a hybrid is also God's plan, crossing, like two kinds of cows to make this cow. Engineering is a different story. I don't see that in God's plan. Now, I'll give you an example of a hybrid. I used to have those questions when I used to collect black raspberries on my dad's bigger property before he split it up. I saw red raspberry, black raspberry, and I believe the cross in between is a purple raspberry. I actually saw it in nature happen. That field is no longer there. I saw the field actually grow over a period of years, and grass outgrow it, and trees outgrow it, and where it moved, and very little is left. But I did see the natural cross actually happen. And God allows us to breed animals for better sport. So I think the work of, who is the big breeder? Luther Burbank. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I've actually pollinated squash when we didn't have much bumblebees. You want to get that first squash pollinated. You take the male blossom, peel the leaves off. I've had people say you take a cotton swab and all.
Right.
I found a much better way. You peel the leaves off, and you simply go around like this in the female blossom, and you can do it to multiple female blossoms, but there's usually plenty of male blossoms. And I've actually had food that I would not have otherwise had that way. So what do you think that is?
I don't even know. Zucchini?
Black zucchini.
Is it really?
Black summer squash. Green summer squash, right? What do you think that is?
I don't even know.
Yellow summer squash
Really?
with the warts on it. A little more warty. Okay. You also have smooth yellow summer squash. You have crookneck. This may be a crookneck.
Why all the wording?
It's just the variety. It's
The
not
house.
that warty when you sell it in the store or you buy it or
Right.
you eat it. It gets wartier as it grows older. This is seed saving. When you save seeds, you need to be very diligent and responsible, especially if you're ever going to resell seeds. You need to keep records. That's something I'm not really good about, but I'm learning to be good about, like tagging things in the vineyard. If you ever needed to give someone a cutting, you planted a cutting, you want to know what the variety is. The best thing is have it right there. The reason I have this stick in my hand, we have a very short season. When I put this away in the fall, it was green. The seeds are still ripening through the winter, right, in storage. It's taking the food of the plant going into the seed. And so now I have seeds that hopefully, when you open it up, it may not, but hopefully you have seeds in there that you can plant this year, and then you don't have to pay for them.
Yeah.
And you could even sell them or give them away as friends. And I have seeds for you when you leave today. I have
Nice.
5 packets. Not of this yet, because I haven't opened it. This tells me that plant is a seed-producing plant, and it tells me not to harvest that, because it'll be tempting. As you're going down the road, this tells me no. And then the rest of that plant, you take off all of the other plants. You prune all the other plants.
Except for the one.
And flowers off. You're
Really?
pruning the flowers continually off, except for this one to continue to grow.
I've always seen people like big old X's on them or something like that.
Something to stop you from doing it. So, and plant pruning is quite a science. We have a short season. I've done cherry tomatoes here that 6 plants gave hundreds of pounds of fruit. And literally in the fall, to make what's green go ripe, you need to prune off all this hedge growing around. And you go in ruthlessly, and I've had to do it 2 or 3 times in a season to just prune this wild growth off and then take off all new blossoms to get the rest to produce. And then, of course, you can take the plant and the green tomatoes and ripen them at a certain stage. Now take an estimate. You see how tiny those twigs are?
Sure.
Of the 15 plants, and we probably had About 12 in production last year. Take an estimate about how much fruit I got off in pounds.
For all of them, or just this row?
For all of them.
115?
About 200 pounds.
Really?
150 to 200 pounds. Pretty good estimate. After
That's
being
a
planted
lot
in
off of
4
those small.
years and several not surviving. This plant, for example, why do you think it's doing well? My guess is this was a tree in 2005. You can see the tree in there,
Right.
the stump. You can see already it's rotting. Why? Because I've covered it, just recently covered it. The ants have been working on it. And I can't afford a backhoe to pull out all the stumps. And why pull out the stumps anyway?
Exactly.
It's food.
Yep.
It was so much food off this that the year after, so this was 2 years ago, so this was 2014, the very next year it produced like 15 big bunches of grapes.
Wow.
It was so much food that it bent this. You can see how it bent,
Yep.
and I'm trying to keep everything nice and straight. You don't have to, but I like to. That I had to actually tie it up with rags. And then we do have a problem with birds and with yellow jackets. So you go to Walmart and you buy like a gauze. I can show you if I remember it. But I also am pruning fewer and fewer branches. This is a backup branch, by the way. But I used to do two racks, but now I just do one. I'm using a system where you do an arch with leaving the canes, and then every bud is, when a bud comes out and usually has 3 bunches, you take off the 3rd bunch.
Okay.
There's also a way that when the bunch grows, if the tag end is too long, you actually prune the end of the bunch so that you get all that fruit there. The Liamalo is noted for growing in 90 days from bud to harvest. 90 days is our window. Anything over is iffy. So if beans take 110 days from planting to drying, it's iffy. You might have to bring them in the barn to finish drying. But again, if they're shelly beans, you can freeze them, and they're delicious. Last year was the first time I really enjoyed shelly beans, and that was off Kentucky Wonder pole beans that I left an area, go to seed, so I put again tags to say do not harvest that area, and then some of them when I harvested at the end when it was starting to freeze, I put them in some of my vegetable bakes, and they're just delicious, and it was like opened up my eyes.
Now, do you make these tags?
No, you actually can buy them and then you just write on with pen, but they just there's like an aluminum on a plastic.
Right.
Hyssop.
Hyssop.
Hyssop has been shown to help ripen grapes and do well. I had too much in here. I had just about every pole had it, and the next year when they really took off and became woody big masses is when a lot of my plants didn't grow as well. So you can have too much of a good thing. I do have comfrey at the ends. The end plants of any row tend, they say, to have more grapes, and that's because it has more root space.
Right.
And I think I had one grape here, a black Lenora Seedless, that I've transplanted that I actually was so vigorous. I mean, the thing was putting out 30-foot shoots every year. Was way down here. It was just unmanageable. And I put it over in what looks like an archway. You'll eventually see over in the kitchen garden. The other grape that I took out was a newer type of variety of grape, but the leaves went to mildew and fungus pretty quick. And you can't have that in a vineyard. I noticed researching it, it didn't show that it really is stuck around that variety, and so I think it's been dropped for that. Everything has different resistance, and you don't want fungus and mildew in a vineyard if you can afford it, especially with our damp falls. This was a bad hillside. This was one of those in-between zones. And so I got tired of mowing the grass.
Yep.
And so I eventually started throwing compost, put down burlap, threw rock, and eventually put in these peaches 2 years ago. And the year after planting them, they did very well. I had some peaches on them. Now that I'm more into nuts, in the long term, eventually hopefully this nut tree will be bigger. It's a nice, be a nice zone break between the vineyard and here. You always got to be willing to pull up your mistakes. I put in, gooseberries.
Oh, yeah.
A thornless variety of gooseberry. So I think it was Tixia, very, very large gooseberries like this. And it's like provides the lemon that Southerners would get in lemon. It had that flavor. It was very, very good. But it was very thorny, even though they said it was virtually thornless. I couldn't get them thorny. And they always needed so much staking and an immense amount of pruning. In the branch mulch, they just, came up suckers everywhere. And eventually I said, I need room for beans or something else. And so I pulled up the mistake. You have this inner trash saying, don't do this, don't do this. And yet you have to have the courage to do what needs to be done. It's just like pruning. At first I couldn't prune very well. I didn't see the value. How can you see the value? But it does work, right? Maybe it's the value of clipping your toenails and cutting your hair. I don't know. We all have to do something, right, to stay ahead. This is some remnants I forgot of the onions. I've had onions in here. I had garlic in here. I've had 2 peach trees. In fact, one was here, one was here. One was my most productive tree right there where the onions are. But now we have a good grow area. These are loganberries. And I found the best way to work with them. They are thornless. I always appreciate the thornless. The best way to work with them is just like in a vineyard or a tree, where all below a certain level is considered a sucker, except for the new.
Right.
That's next year's canes. And so I usually prune only in the spring. The reason is, if you prune in the fall, I'd love to sometimes prune in the fall, but you don't know the winter damage that will occur. When you have 4.5 feet of snow, you have snow out here. It was banked up here. You're shoveling off the roof. And so this now seems to be a better zone to pick. You can get almost a harvest the whole season. They're not, super abundant, but they're just a lovely tasting, tart, sweet. They have the real balance. People who have tasted them, it's better than raspberries, loganberries. But again, all this new growth here is as easy as this, right? To take off.
Yep.
At any stage, even when it's bigger. And then all, these dead leaves, I used to be picky and take it off, but now you're always in a hurry. Used to even take all this off, right? But it falls off. Again, false box. Again, anything you plant in the mulch, this is false Solomon seal, has some nice red berries, very, very tart, probably really good for you, but it also takes off. You see a problem here. In this area was growing some sort of something in the daisy family. I forget it right now. But it has taken off everywhere.
Yep.
And you wouldn't believe that you have to pull up all that with a potato fork. I did the same thing right around the water spigot yesterday with fireweed. One plant started, I left it 2 years. It was all over and under and everywhere. And I just ripped up whole long roots of it.
Wow.
This is a new grow area. There are nut trees. This is my oldest walnut tree. I actually put in 3. And here's the flare I'm talking about. See that flare? Right there.
Right.
Okay, you want, when you're planting it, everything flared to that tube needs to be above ground. Now, of course, it's going to be really, really small down there, right? When we first planted. But certainly I was planting things too deep, and I was putting in manure down the hole, which big, big, big mistake. And you can see wood. I had trees around the outhouse that I took out last year. I don't know if you can see some of the
Yep,
stumps.
the stumps.
There are about 5 trees in there. And of course, if you let it go too long, then you risk damaging the other trees when you cut them down, that they fall into your other trees. So, but notice all the prunings, like from the berries, can go into the next grow area.
Yep.
And if not, you can burn it and use the ash. I mean, there's always something you can use. I have over there 2 mulberries. I put in a lot of kale here this year. And there's another walnut. This is kale coming back, red Russian kale, that would go to seed, but I really don't need the seed because I have plenty of it. But you're welcome to taste a bite.
Oh, I love kale.
And of course, it's second year, so it's going to be a little different taste, but it still should be pretty good. We have peas coming up already. You're going to see them planted right here.
Mm-hmm.
Few. These snap peas will go over my head. So I've actually some years had to prune them. And then every year I put in about three strands of cord here. And because it's so fertile, the first time we did have this plowed like 10 years ago, and I put buckwheat. After I put this in, I didn't plant that year, I put buckwheat all over. And it's a good cover crop. And then of course I built up with compost, and then of course wood chips. And when I plant, instead of 1 seed every 2 inches, I would take a 2-inch wide strip and plant as thick as a space of seed between each.
Really?
So it's like every seed is a space apart, 2 inches wide on each side. You do end up with not being able to hardly walk down the middle. I would take strips of old bed sheets and retie it. And then eventually I've been, not planting as heavily, but you can plant very heavily. This 5 rows, basically 8 feet, and the last row is about 5 feet. The first year I planted after that preparation produced about 1.5 bushels of peas. It's a jungle.
Yeah.
And basically, you wouldn't believe it, but this, what looks very bare now, can turn into a jungle of food every spring and every summer.
I totally can see it.
A jungle of food. And that's what you want. But you don't want to get too much ahead. This is a nitrogen fixer. I forget the variety. This is Gooseberry. I think I have a goji or wolfberry right there. Another nitrogen fixer. Okay. This is seed saving. If I hadn't netted this, the rabbits would have gotten it by now, because I know they've been eating the kale.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You want to get your camera in on probably this side. Get my head out of the way. And zoom into right here.
Oh, well.
You got that?
Yep.
Isn't that amazing? It's a yellow or golden globe turnip.
Wow.
I'm always looking for food that you can eat raw for breakfast. To put in a breakfast salad that has good nutrition and all. This is one of the really, really good one. There's squash that is, you have to cook, some winter squash. It's just
Right.
really, really bitter. Summer squash is a good food. It's a bulk. You know, we work. We don't want just little leaves. Sometimes we want roots and carrots and, you know, something bulkier. Squash is a little tough for me now. There are some varieties that, one variety I was developing, but some, you know, like the Hubbard, it's just bitter raw. It has to be cooked and put with sugar and salt or whatever. This just massively grew, and this is a microclimate. After the peas grow, last year I kind of really delayed. About the middle of July, I finally replanted this into turnips and rutabagas. I believe this is a rutabaga, 2 rutabagas going to seed, and they're very good size. They don't look it, but you know, once they get this early start, they should have stalks coming up this high. But anyway, I covered this thick, and I'm so glad I did, because most of the things didn't survive this year that I planned on, you know, getting seed from because of that sub-zero weather for a long time in December, hit by by snow, and then sub-zero for a long time in January. But I'm really blessed. This can still be eaten by gophers or bugs or whatever, but that is impressive, and I hope to be able to get seed off of that. Most of my seed saving started by mistake, like kale or spinach that just I couldn't go out and clean in time.
And what's this back over here?
These are 2 varieties of raspberry. I know this is a red canby. The nice thing about it is virtually thornless. When it first starts, it is thorny, but as it grows into maturity or the canes get bigger, there's no thorns. That's always nice. And I love the lush growth. In a year that you see a really dark purple top, you know there's going to be tremendous growth. It's fully mineralized. If the leaves are light green, you know maybe it's too much rain, it's being washed out. But I've noticed tips that come in really, really purple almost when they should be green, right? If they're fully mineralized, they'll be able to expand much, much further. Of course, there's basalt I put in years ago. And this I'll probably, as I'm starting to slowly do more and more, is probably just fill it in. But the problem is once you fill it in with wood chips, you'll end up more runners like over here, all over. Of course, if you're giving away plants or selling plants, it's a good thing. This is a variety of yellow or golden raspberry. It is thorny. It's not too thorny up here, but it is thornier. And it's a fall variety that if you cut this down, you could actually get from those canes this year berries in the fall. However, I prefer it as a second year, you know, use that second year cane. It's a primal cane variety, meaning on the first cane can produce. But I prefer second year because by the time in the fall it comes, this is kind of a microclimate in the shade of the buildings, which is great for not needing water. But it's so cold to harvest, and the bees aren't out to pollinate it, and it's iffy. And usually they're way up high above all the growth. It's a mess. So I just prefer growing it at the same time and then freezing it. There was something else. Oh. Every year, I tend to take out more and more canes, and the resulting canes become much, much more productive. Now, a problem you do have using mulch and burlap, as you see, you're on burlap. Here's fresh burlap I laid yesterday. The problem you have is, it's also wonderful, these plants will send roots clear under the path. That's 4 feet. I ended up with a full bed of raspberries for about 5 years. I'm wanting root crops here, so I've had to take them out. It also planted this entire section over here under this path and over here. And now I've taken out, and they're still trying to come back, right?
Yep.
I'll be digging them out, but I put a walnut tree there. You know, hopefully have enough space when these things are massively big.
Right.
Now eventually, 25 years later, these may not continue to grow. You know, they are old years growth. This probably could be ripped out, lift more room, but we'll see how it goes. This is, Gopher was into the onions that were here, and I think I'm pulling out more and more of the onions. Crop I grew here last year was parsnips. And I thought they'd come up, you know, you think they look like carrots, you think they'd have the leaves like carrots. I was impressed. Beautiful leaves, and they really lasted well past the frost. So parsnip, definitely something I want to grow. More the chalky, the chubby kind of parsnip, about a foot, rather than the long ones. And there is one, I think it's called Turga. There's several varieties. There's also the Hamburg rooted parsley that I'm also interested in planting because of that. This parsley has been established for several years, and you can see it coming back year after year from the seeds before. And we can see some gopher field mice damage also. This is this right here.
Right.
But this ends up massive amount of parsley, more than I could possibly eat. You know, you really don't need that much. Once I started eating kale, I hardly eat any other greens. More kales, lots and lots of kale. This is that Black Lenora vine that went so aggressive, I figure it might as well go aggressive in here. I used to put in tomatoes. One year I put in like a dozen tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes do well in our short season. The problem with tomatoes is most tomato varieties go dormant at about 45 degrees. And then it takes several weeks to get out of that dormancy. Well, here in North Idaho, our nights very typically will be about 50 degrees even in hot weather. We swing down 30 degrees, more or less, every night from the daytime temperature. And why is that? It's because we don't have the humidity that they do have like in Iowa or the Corn Belt. And that humidity allows it to stay hot and moist all night long, so the corn can grow, the tomatoes can grow. Illinois is another country, place that my folks came from. That happens, but we don't have that. We don't have the humidity to trap in the heat. And so if every night the temperature is going down to 45 degrees and tomatoes take 2 or 3 weeks to get out of dormancy, right, at that temperature, there are some varieties adapted to go beyond that. But you do need to either go with cherry tomatoes or varieties like that, or use a greenhouse or some sort of cover. The original thing was that this was going to be a greenhouse, but you really don't need a greenhouse when you know Paul's system, right?
Right.
I would like to have one for through the winter or for extending the season. I thought that when I put in the greenhouse there'd be tremendous pressure against this, but once I used it and tied it in, there's no pressure at all. So you might, somebody might use this system. Because of my back, I didn't want to come into a system where I'm always bending down. I wanted to walk in.
Right.
And yet this has taken a lot of snow load. Sometimes I've knocked the snow down, but it's been a nice system. I do have another grate planted here on this side. And what I would do is I would grow kale in here that would go through the hottest part of the summer and still really, really grow your greens like kale because of the cover of the grapes. And so that's the idea. The other thing is, too, I now put pole beans on the side, and that allows shade for the kale. So I've had kale last year. You can see the stumps.
Yep.
Did very well. Now, why are there no stumps here? The root to this thing is laying all the way down to here and all the way down to there. Obviously, so it's amazing amount. You need to study this. I don't know if it'll survive or come back, but it was very, very aggressive. And so might as well let it be aggressive on top and let it go for a while.
Matthew in Oregon has something like this for his melon tunnel, and he goes in there in the summertime and takes a nap.
That would be nice. That would be nice. You can see some of the kale coming back here as well.
Yeah.
But here it didn't do it. Maybe this is too cold. Whereas a tree would be warmer, this could have invited the cold. If it's meant to be, we might have a visitor in here. Nope, no gopher. That's a Mcafee Trap. Have you ever seen one?
Nope, Paul talks about them all the time. But
Okay, they're now about $10 at the store I go to. There's a little earthworm in there. Let's get him out. Not too hard to set. Be very careful with your fingers. I'm gonna snap this back. Okay. That goes up and into the hole. So you have to adjust it, right, to get it in, ready to set the hole. Okay, and you're going to be setting it like that. But you now push down, put that in the center, and you push down. Watch those wicked wires. Okay, that's what's going to trap your... You have complete control, and you really get this down, and your fingers out of the way. Now you aim the hole, and you're ready to set. As you push down the hole, I recommend you keep your thumb in there, and then you want to dig out the hole, have it know the direction, right? And I think they've already filled it. It feels like they've filled it in. But I'll still put it in. Sometimes they get smart to it, and I'll put a piece of wood in there or something that they don't see the metal or something like that. You set that, and then I go back, push that flange back and still feel that, the little rod coming through, and let it. And I'll do one more piece. I have it tied to a stake, and I'll stake it there, so that a dog or cat or they can't take it back down the hole. And then cover, you can put branches, you can put onions, you'll see different things. But you want it black and dark, and you want to try not to have too much human smell. And then I pulled, I think, 3 out of this hole just this spring.
wow.
And I had this covered. I had because of the rabbits trying to eat them, I had a grate. I had branch mulch, plenty of branch mulch or wood chips over it. And now I want to pull you some carrots. So we'll leave that here. But they definitely, there's carrots right there. There's a carrot. Let me get you a nice size carrot so you get an idea. I want to save, if possible, some for seed, but...
Oh, it's huge.
How about that guy?
Look at that.
This is the second year of a binary. This will now be going to seed, hopefully if we don't have the gophers eating it. Now that's a storage carrot. Now I've a couple weeks ago gave a carrot, pulled up some carrots, and a gentleman in Utah, he went back home and he shared a carrot. His daughter ate most of it. He tasted it and said it was really sweet. He actually planted that carrot because he can now have seeds from it as well. And he came and shared some seeds with me, so it's always nice to share things.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can find some other nice size. Okay, see there's slug damage.
Yeah.
Slugs are not friendly. And also pill bugs. They're nice. I mean, they do have a purpose, but I probably should start opening this up a little bit more. I'm still afraid of the rabbits, but you can see the size of them.
Yeah.
Nice and massive, big. It's a lot of food. This is a nice reddish color here. You'll also notice this will be a good example of how Paul talks about not as just a single line, but how they've grown. You know, there's one back there, there's one here. They literally pushed themselves out of the way because of the softness. You can see a clump right there. So this is just one little area I wanted to see if I can get seed this year off of. See, there's a clump growing. That'd probably be worth pulling out. They're all small, but they're probably really good. Yeah. And we'll share them after. And you'll get to taste some. So
Nice.
you can see how just
Yep.
solid food. And then you want bigger food, just space it out a little bit more, thin them out as you go. This is broccoli. Now my hands are nice and dirty. This is broccoli. I do get a variety called Arcadia that I buy from a nursery rather than have to grow it myself. I would love to grow it, but it is so productive. How do you make broccoli more productive? The side shoots can turn into heads if you prune the leaves.
Really?
Look at how the first head comes in. It has about 5 leaves under that head. If you create the same environment for every side shoot and have plenty of nutrition and water or whatever if needed, it will grow a head. Each side shoot will grow a head as big as the first. That's been a blessing to know, and today I have the privilege to share with the world. God really is a superabundant God. This same row, I give abundance away. And sometimes I'm worried, but I haven't frozen any myself, and the Lord provides. Those side shoots turn into heads, but you do have to. I don't have always the time to prune. You know how it is. Eventually
Right.
you get involved with things. But if you'll do that, whatever is blocking the light of that side shoot, and make sure it's a good side shoot. You don't want a little pencil, straggly thing. But any side shoot, if you want to reduce the number of side shoots to get big heads, it's amazing. I have photos of a plant, where you can actually see the cuts from the previous broccoli, and 4 side shoots are together this
Wow.
big. This, 4 separate. And it's like getting as much broccoli the second and even the third time in our short season. So why waste the room of the plant? Now another trick that a lot of people don't know. We have cutworms. And a cutworm can cut one plant down and it's done. And it's looking to, it goes to the next plant in the row and camps out, and that night it will cut the next plant. And I have found them. I had a friend come and say, you go down the row and you look for them. Dig with a stick, take your time, and you poke around or poke with your finger, and you'll find that cutworm.
No, really?
I found it at the bottom of my grapevines. Remember I was telling you the cutworm was going up and eating the buds? I have found them at the bottom. It's hard. Sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. I will put diatomaceous earth too on a grapevine, because to lose a grapevine, it can be, means another plant, more time, and all the effort. But this lady, I think 2 years ago, maybe last year, what I was doing is I was taking the transplant and putting in a pot and waiting till the stem was thick enough that the cutworm cannot cut it, right? What she said is you go down and you get 4-inch, 3-inch, I found 4-inch was the best, 4-inch PVC pipe. Don't get the thick variety. Get a thin variety that's easy to cut. And cut about 4 inches and make a collar around that plant. And you bury 2 inches in the soil and 2 inches above the soil, and you plant inside. And then your cutworm usually doesn't go 2 inches below the soil, and it usually will not be able to climb go up the sides and back down. It may be trapped inside with the ring, and then you'll lose a plant, but you won't keep losing a bunch of plants. Plus, I don't have then to have all the potting and potting soil. I can take the plants and starts directly into it. When you have a short season, you want to make sure as much as possible every foot square counts for the short time, right? And so that's why I do a lot of planting in flats first. and then you can get everything spaced very quickly. I'll plant beans. I won't do, but beans. I'll plant beans, and you'll wonder why didn't the crop come up, and you'll have cutworms eat them, or you'll have something eat them before they even come up. The pill bugs, the slugs,
Right.
whatever. This is asparagus right here.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, and it's coming in. I didn't
Yeah.
see that. This is the first time I'm seeing the asparagus come in.
Mm-hmm.
This was a surprise.
'Tis the season.
Yep. Now cutworms will take your asparagus, and you'll see it come up and turn like this,
Right.
and that's because a cutworm probably has done damage below. We also have asparagus bugs. The beetles, they're orangish, and I finally found them either last year or the year before. Now these, even though these are short, I think it's still worth pulling up one or two. I do like what Paul recommends,
Breaking them off way down at the.
as close down
The
as
crown.
you can. That's good enough. But there's something interesting. There's always more food than most people realize, and I'll go back to the broccoli about it. While he will snap it here,
Right.
you can also take a paring knife and cut off this and a certain amount of the core until it gets hard. It's perfectly edible, and it's almost as tasty, if not sweeter, than the top.
Really?
So if you want to, you're the first comer this year. The same thing with broccoli. When at the end of the season you have all these big side shoots, have all these big trunks, and you've taken off the top as a head, you can actually take a paring knife. So if this is survival food, right? You can take a paring knife and take off those sides, and the same thing. There's a lot of food that you, of course, it's time. You wouldn't want to waste it, normally. But if you were trying to survive, if times were tough, there is food you can eat. My dad has the story of how an asparagus, during the Depression, an asparagus bed fed him and his family for months every spring. He would go out, and I believe they had a linden tree. He and his sister would go out and shake the linden leaves out on the asparagus bed. And I think he said it was like 9 feet by 9 feet. But his mother, when they didn't have food, would say, go and check the asparagus. And they'd get asparagus, and she put a white sauce with it, and maybe they had like toast, and they would literally put that, and that was many meals during the sparse spring months. So this is how people lived. My gardens tend to be planted later than earlier, and in a way it's a blessing because it's more of a storage garden. You want your storage to go in a little later than earlier, so that you don't have, I've had the experience of pumpkins or squash, I think it was pumpkins, winter squash, that spaghetti squash. I didn't harvest in July, ended up rotting at the end of July. So if you want it into storage, if you're storing food, you want your gardens to go in later. Where the peas are is actually 2 seasons. I could probably get more out of some of these grow areas, get more food or whatever. But I'm blessed with the space.
Oh, yeah.
Almost anybody who has a farm of any size, you eventually have to learn to pot.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just mint was growing into the asparagus. Mint can be very aggressive. This is a chocolate mint, I believe, and so this is a thornless blackberry. I don't even eat them. I don't even know. Sometimes I give them away. These are what's one of those edible leaves plants? It has a mulberry. This is I think this is Siberian pea bush. They're edible, whatever. So, you have to learn to pot. Over here are flats. These 3 have been out all winter. I'm doing hawthorn. I'm hoping these are the hawthorn seeds. Okay, this is kale. I can cover this with this and put a heater under here if I have to.
Right.
But this is nice to have, even when nothing's on here. I'll take stuff out of my van, burlap, cardboard. If it's a nice day, I can process stuff here without bending over, which is bad on my back. Potting soil, again, you see this is a little coarse with that much branch mulch. You see I took quite a bit of that out here. This is a seed called Chinese Yellowhorn that a friend gave to me, and it's a big seed like this, so it can be as coarse as it wants. This is not planted yet, but it really helps to have things in flat, especially if you're trying to fight cutworms. You want, I think, Asparagus in here. The recommendation is grow them because your slugs really love them. Asparagus, after a couple years, I guess the root is really good, but I'm looking mainly at the nitrogen fixing ability now for it. Just have them around the property. Sometimes the wood chips the wood that you get out in the nursery, I will grind it down and it will be hard to crush, right?
Right.
Yeah, we got an earthworm in there. Okay, so I leave it sit under here where it catches rain and gets soggy. And now, after a year or two, it's now able to disintegrate. So, why not? Why waste it? And this is very rich. It's wood that ends up turning, because of the bacteria or the ants working it, it turns red. Have you ever seen a log that's red and rotten? And I just know it's mineral rich.
Out in the forest.
That's exactly where I got these. And then it was too hard a wood. It was chunks that, you screen out. And then, so let's go down here. This, by the way, is an example of stakes from the prunings.
Oh, yeah.
And canes. I used to have sheep. Haired sheep. They were like goats in here. And chickens. With the chickens, this was their pen. Without much windows, these white doors ended up putting a lot of light in here.
Yeah.
And so that they were again recycled. This up here is to hang garlic. It's one of my best systems after trial and error. It's a 10-foot T-post. On farms you can always use T-posts.
Yeah.
Okay? And then simply what I use is a system like this, where you make, and I forget the name of that knot, and then when you're bunching the garlic, in bunches you're hanging them like this, right? And then you hang them, you can hang a lot of garlic in here. And those ties that I swing up on each other are what you would fasten a fence on a T-post.
Just
so
like two of them looped together.
So it's all recyclable. And actually I only used about 5 rows last year. And as you can see how dark, to keep the morning sun from hitting the garlic, and the burlap, once I open the vents in the barn at the top, if you look at the top on either side.
Oh yeah, they got the boards there.
Right, they got the boards. You do need to really vent because it can get hot, it can get sweltering hot. And this is a fantastic area to process cardboard, burlap, the garlic. Garlic in boxes, here's how it will cure. A lot of the potato onions will be just vented in boxes. And then when I'm doing the garlic, I have a step ladder.
To be able to reach up to.
Right. Now, one of the things when you have walnuts is you need to dry your walnuts. This would then, Lord willing, I live that long and the trees grow and everything else be right, I'd be able to hang walnuts in the barn. So it's
like in a sack or something, or? In
a sack, exactly. Now, a lot of this has come by trial and error, a little bit of watching videos, but sometimes the knack just comes how to do it. How to use wood chips for soil. Well, some of this soil right here was rotting wood chips that I sorted out with a 1/2 inch mesh on top of a bucket. It's a, you can find it at like a gold show. You find a plastic thing, and I wish I had an example of it. Is it here? I don't think so. And I sit on one bucket out there and then shake it, and you just keep throwing off the stuff that doesn't go through. Then, this isn't really a milk crate, right? It doesn't have the holes in all normal milk crate. What I'm going to now do is I'm going to need, if I was planting bigger seeds in that, no problem. Beans, no problem. However, fine seeds that might, the stuff might not come up through. And if you keep shaking, you'll get too much, long stuff go through. Okay, that's pretty dry. You really don't want to plant stuff into dry stuff, but there's enough moisture in that.
Right.
Okay, so that was some regular old dirt, I think, just for minerals, but I had some jade plants in, more like a desert soil. You don't have to have peat. One thing about peat is if it's not wet, you need 24 to 48 hours of hydration, or it will kill a plant, like a live plant or a root. It can kill it. So you really do need to have it plenty. Then it's a matter of stirring. If you don't want to use your hands or get your gloves dirty, use one of these things. You find it at a gold mining place.
Oh, yeah.
You can use 2 of them if you really, I don't have the 2 here, I have 3 actually. I'm not going to give you everything. I can put in rock basalt. One of the best things I have found, because our soils are acid and we want to, a little more acidic and we want alkaline, is oyster shell that you would feed chickens. Really, really valuable for the earthworms and all. I sometimes put it in the grow beds. Now, the next thing is you want to, eventually, this is for people going from a garden to a farm. You want to buy things in bulk. Mm-hmm. You want to go on Amazon. You want to start researching good stuff. My mistake is I got like 100 of these, but without the slits. And then it won't drain. Right. And then you have a water problem. It rots stuff. So I still recycle these. I probably could put holes in them someday. I have time, drill a bunch, of holes through, 5, 10 at a time. Now what you want to do next is you have these. I use them every year. Once they tear, they go into you have your trash right here, right? What you're going to do is you have these all set up like this. I don't need to show you all of them. But I've seen some people at greenhouses do this, and I've learned to adapt it. How do you fill these things? You could sit here all day and go,
right.
Nope.
Yep.
You can actually do the whole thing, or you simply go like this and push your thumbs down, and go again like that and push your thumbs down, and you're ready to go. Why so high? Won't things fall out? As you water, it will tend to settle down. over a period of time. But now it's pretty firm. You can put your indentation for seed. You can then plant your seed and then cover it if you have to pinch it, if you want to go deeper, if you have to fill it in as you plant. And then when you do like kale here on the farm for seed, I will take out of a package the very largest and most round and darkest seed, right? And you can get picky about that. Why not give it a head start of weeks, even years ahead when you consider to get the next seed bigger and bigger? Start with the biggest. Start with the best. You literally, as you see, I'm saving the best carrots, saving the best for seed. It's well worth it, you know, it gives back in the long run. But you do need to pack this down. It is fluffy and you don't want it just to float away or your seed to get lost. In the way you pack down is simply, very simply like that. Another way is, you know, fill it full and just like this. It's not as good as really getting in there. See, that's still a little loose. But notice that's pretty good soil.
Yeah.
And look how fast it came. Of course, it was a lot of sorting before I covered, you know,
Right.
that pile out there. I saw a value, might as well do it. Now, planting carrots into branch mold, sometimes I need to take this kind of soil and put a row in to plant the carrots, and then later, you know, you can put stuff around. But you use a lot of potting soil. Carrots are not an easy thing to grow if you don't know what to do. Have you planted carrots yet?
No, but I was there when Paul just opened a package and went into his orchard, and then a few months later there were carrots all over the place in the orchard.
Yeah, because
So
the soil
I
is
can see how hard it could be.
yeah, at this
Yeah.
stage, yeah.
Yeah,
But,
it was amazing. He just was like, "Yeah, watch this," and I was like, "Okay." You're like, "Yeah, it's planted. Let's go."
The reason carrots are so difficult is the weeds get ahead of the time they germinate, and
Yeah.
then they need the right temperature to germinate. And then you end up with a problem, thinning if they're, you know, now with this type of soil it works that, you know, they grow and move. What's another difficulty of carrots? Another way some commercial farmers handle that is right when the weeds emerge, they come out with torches and blowtorch the thing before the carrot comes up. So their tractors will have fire, you know, coming out of torches off of their ends. So
Well,